Hi everybody, this is Rob Windsor, and in this video we'll take a quick look at what's new and what isn't new for developers in SharePoint 2016. I'll be looking at SharePoint 2016 Beta 2, and this video is being recorded on December 13th, 2015. One important note before we move on, I've spent about a day doing investigation, trying things out, playing around. That combined with what I've heard from other experts and from people at Microsoft, I think I have a decent high-level understanding of the development story for SharePoint 2016. But I absolutely could have incomplete knowledge. I could be wrong on things. So please don't take anything that I say in this video as gospel. It's just the results of my investigation up to this point. So here I have a single server SharePoint VM. I built this VM using two guides. The first is from Critical Path Training. If you go to their website and then go to the member section, you'll need to create a free account on their site to access the member section. But once you're there, you can scroll down a little bit and you can get the SharePoint 2013 VM Setup Guide. This was created for SharePoint 2013, but for the most part, it works for SharePoint 2016. I also use this set of videos on YouTube by Peter Kallstrom. Here Peter's setting up a 3 VM SharePoint 2016 farm in Windows Azure. I use these videos to see where the setup was different in SharePoint 2016 than it was in SharePoint 2013. Using these guides, I was able to build my farm relatively easily. I did have some problems setting up the workflow farm, but that was my fault. I didn't follow the instructions as closely as I should have. Once everything was set up, I started touring around SharePoint 2016 Beta 2. And my first stop was Central Administration. And the first obvious change is this bar at the top with the app launcher or the waffle. So that's new. During the setup and during my inspection of Central Administration, I also found some new settings around hybrid and the hybrid features of SharePoint 2016. But other than those two things, for the most part, Central Admin looks, feels, and behaves the way it did in SharePoint 2013. The next thing I did was create some team sites and developer sites. And again, they have the bar at the top with the app launcher. But other than that, for the most part, they look, feel, and behave the way they did in SharePoint 2013. The next thing I took a look at were the SharePoint system folders. So I went to the root of the system folders. That's program files, common files, Microsoft shared web server extensions. And I see the three folders I see in my SharePoint 2013 farms. I have the 14 folder, that's SharePoint 2010. The 15 folder, that's SharePoint 2013. And the 16 folder, which in my SharePoint 2013 farms is for SharePoint Online. So coming back to my site here, I noticed the number 15 is still in the URLs. So that would imply to me that the core folder for SharePoint 2016 is this one, the same as it was in SharePoint 2013. But I wanted to make sure that was the case, so I went to IIS Manager, and I went to one of my SharePoint sites, and I viewed the virtual directories. And we have the same virtual directories we did, and notice again the number 15 showing up in a lot of these URLs. But if you hover over the place they point to, they're pointing to the 16 folder. So the 15 number is still used in the URLs, but the folder that's pointing to is the 16 folder. So for SharePoint 2016, this is the core folder in the SharePoint system folders. The next thing I wanted to look at was development for SharePoint 2016. So I downloaded Visual Studio 2015. There are no tools for SharePoint 2016 out of the box, so I did some searching around and I found a blog post by the Office team called Latest Microsoft Office Developer Tools for Visual Studio 2015. The top part talks about some tools for Office development, but if I scroll down here a little bit farther, there's some talk about development against SharePoint 2016 Beta 2. So the blog post mentions when you download and install the preview tooling, you get some project templates to create farm and sandbox solutions that will work against SharePoint 2016. But if you take a look a little bit farther down here, it mentions that currently there's no support for building add-ins or apps for SharePoint 2016. And I'll show an example of that in just a second. Before I get into building new solutions and apps, let's take a look at the story around existing solutions and apps. So coming over to my developer site here, one of the first things I wanted to test was, could I use existing apps from the App Store? So I went to Site Contents, and then I went to Add an App, and I added this Tip of the Day app from the App Store. It is this app right here. And it added just fine. I can add it to my site just fine. There's the trust dialog. We can see the app downloading. Now it's installing. And in just a sec, I'll be able to use that app. There we go. Click on it. I'm taken over to the app web. This is a SharePoint hosted app. Notice it's using the old Chrome. And then I can click here to get back to my site. And then click here to get back to my app and so on. So existing apps are working just fine. At least SharePoint hosted apps are. I haven't tried a provider hosted app yet. Sandbox solutions are working fine. So if I go to actually site actions here, site settings, and then go to my solution gallery, I dropped in the solution called Northwind Light. Now this doesn't contain any managed code. It's only Camel. But what it does is create these two lists. I have a products list and a categories list. So I was able to add the existing SharePoint 2013 sandbox solution to my SharePoint 2016 site, activate the feature, and I got my lists. And then I was also able to install a farm solution. So let's go over to Central Administration over here, and then go to System Settings, and Manage Farm Solutions. There is my farm solution. It's the web parts from my advanced web part development session. I give it conferences. So I activated the solution, and then I went to my site here, and I activated the feature to add the web parts to the web part gallery. And then I went to Site Contents, and I went to Site Pages, and this has a feature receiver, a managed code feature receiver, which creates a bunch of web part pages, and those part pages are all there, and the web parts contained in those part pages, which are implemented through managed code, are all working. So far I've been able to use an existing app, a SharePoint hosted app, an existing sandbox solution that contained no managed code, and an existing farm solution that did contain managed code without any issues whatsoever. All right, so now let's take a look at Visual Studio 2015. So here I have 2015, and again, I've downloaded and installed the Office Developer Preview for SharePoint 2016. I'll go in and say New Project. And here under Office and SharePoint, we have Office add-ins, which include SharePoint add-ins, formerly called apps. And we have SharePoint Solutions. And the preview added the SharePoint 2016 templates here. So let's start with the empty project template and click OK. I'm going to use a different site collection route for testing. So that's Demo 3. And I want to deploy this as a farm solution. We'll go ahead and click Finish. I'm going to right-click on my project and choose Add New Item. And we can see the item templates are similar to those you would see in Visual Studio 2013 or 2012 for SharePoint 2013. We'll create a visual web part. We'll call this the Hello web part. And click Add. And then in the markup here, I'll open up the toolbox and pin that. And then I'll drop a drop-down list onto my designer here. And then I'll add a couple of break tags. And then I'll add a grid view. And then we'll close up the toolbox. We'll go into design view. We'll set some properties on the drop-down list. So I want to set the auto postback is equal to true. And I want to add in the event handler for the click event or the selected indexed changed event. So I'll double click on the control to do that. All right, so now we're ready to write some code. Before we do that, we'll use the Microsoft.SharePoint Assembly. Notice that the version of this assembly is 16, not 15 as it is in SharePoint 2013. Here in the page load, first I'll check for a postback. So I'll say if this.page.isPostback, then I just want to return. If it's not a postback, I want to get the list collection from the current web and then bind that into the dropdown. So I'll say here var web is equal to sp context.current. And then I'll just use a little squiggly here to resolve add the using statement I need to resolve that type name. Let me try that again. There we go. And then I'll say here drop down list 1 dot data source is equal to web dot lists. And then drop down list 1 dot data text field is equal to title. I want to show the title of the list in the dropdown. And then finally, dropdown list 1 dot data bind. And then here in the event handler, I need to go get the web, so I'll just copy and paste that line. And then I want to get the selected list, so that's var list is equal to dropdown list 1. Oh, sorry, no, not that. It's equal to web.lists, and then I want to use the indexer, put the name of the list, and I get the name of the list by dropdown list1.text. So that'll give me a reference to the selected list, and then he says capitalize that T. Try that again. There we go. Before I data bind, I want to get the data table associated with the list using the getDataTableHelper method. So that's var table is equal to list.items.getDataTable. And then I'll bind that to the grid view. So grid view 1 dot data source is equal to table and grid view 1 dot data bind. All right, so Control-Shift-B to do a build. Make sure we got everything syntactically correct. We do. So now let's go ahead and deploy our package. So I'll right-click on the project and choose Deploy. That's done. So we come over to Central Administration here and our Solution Management and refresh. There's our solution package, and then come over to the system folders and go to 16, template features, and scroll down to the S's. There we find SharePoint Project 4, Feature 1. All right, so I should now be able to go to the root of the Demo 3 site collection. So let me just do that. So Demo 3. And then go to Site Contents. And then over to Site Pages. We'll create a new web part page. So I'll go to Files, and then drop down New Document, choose Web Part Page. We'll call this page Test. We'll make it a one web part zone page. We'll make sure that's in Site Pages, and then click Create. And then we'll click Add a Web Part. From the custom group, we'll choose the SharePoint Project 4 Hello Web Part. We'll click Add. We'll get out of edit mode. And then we'll force a post back so the event handlers run. So let me just go ahead and remove the query string from the URL here. And then ASPX, hit enter. So here are all the names of the lists within the site. And then we can go ahead and pick one, and then the data for that list should show in the grid view. And obviously I picked a bad list because we don't have anything in the solution gallery. Let's see, we should have the web part gallery should have stuff inside of it. So there we go. There's our grid now populated. So that was creating a brand new solution. Let's try to import an existing solution. So I'll start up another instance of Visual Studio. And over here in my Downloads folder, I have this folder called Northwind Light, and in here it contains the sandbox solution I used to provision out the products and categories list I showed you earlier. So this is a SharePoint 2013 solution created with Visual Studio 2013. So we'll come over here and we'll open up that project. It's in Downloads and then Northwind Light. And there's a solution file. We'll go ahead and click Open. This dialog indicates that we need to go through an upgrade process, so we'll go ahead and click OK here. So here's the upgrade report. We see it needed to make some non-functional changes. So we can go ahead and close this guy down. And then in here we see we still have our lists feature. And this feature has our categories instance and our categories definition. Same thing with the products instance and products definition. Here are the element manifests for those. There's our product instance. And in here is our product definition. Oh, sorry, I had the other way around. This is the instance. The other one was the definition. So that all looks good. Let's come up to our project here, right-click, and choose to publish out our WSP. We'll put this into the Downloads folder. And click Publish. If we take a look at the project properties, so let me just sort these alphabetically and come down here, we'll see this is a sandbox solution. So let's go over to our site. We're in the Demo 3 site collection still. And we'll go to Site Settings, and then we'll go to the Solutions Gallery. We'll upload our sandbox solution. And our WSP is in the Downloads folder. There it is there. We'll click Open, OK. We'll activate the solution. And now we'll go to Site Settings. And Manage Site Features. And come back to our project here. And the name of the feature we're looking for is Add Northwind Demo Lists. There it is there. We'll go ahead and activate that feature. And there are our lists. There's the products list. And there's our categories list. And if we go back to our web part, so we'll go to Site Contents. And scroll down to Site Pages. And then go to the test page. We should now be able to select products or categories out of the drop down here and see the data for that list. All right, one final demo. You may notice my taskbar has changed a bit. I had to reboot the VM because it was getting a little bit slow. But let's go back to Visual Studio and let's take a look at apps or add-ins. So I'll create a new project here. And in the Office add-in section, I'll choose SharePoint add-in. And then click OK. And I'll target the Demo 3 site collection, create a SharePoint hosted app, and then I'll click Next. So if you recall earlier, I showed you that blog post from the Office team, and it said that they haven't updated the app projects in Visual Studio yet. And we can really see that here. So there is no option for SharePoint 2016. So no matter which one of these I choose, if I try to target SharePoint 2016, it's not going to work correctly. So let's pick SharePoint 2013, which is the closest, and then click Finish. And here we see the default page. It's a site page. And it references app.js, which is the code behind for the page. That's in the scripts folder. This is basically the same as what we had in Visual Studio 2013. The format of the code is a little bit different, and the way that the scripts are loaded here is a little bit different, but, you know, big picture, it's the same. Now, if I try to run this, here's where I'm going to see an error. So here we see the deployment errors dialog. I don't want to continue. And then we can see the error message is in the output window. The required version of SharePoint Foundation or SharePoint Server is not installed in the system. It's looking for SharePoint 2013. And if I go to the project properties, and then down here in the SharePoint section, I change the target from 2013 to SharePoint Online and click OK. And then try to run, still targeting my SharePoint 2016 site. I again get an error, go back to the output window. Required version of SharePoint Foundation or SharePoint Server is not installed. The target version it's looking for is 16.1. So I'm 95% certain if I built the app, created the app package, put the app package in the local app catalog, it would work. That's a lot of work to do during development, especially when you're going through the iterative process. So realistically, we need to wait for the Office team to change the add-in or the app project templates to support SharePoint 2016. So to wrap up, based on what I've seen in my, admittedly short time working with SharePoint 2016, and based on what I've heard, or combining that with what I've heard from other people in the community, my impression is that the dev story for SharePoint 2016 on-premises is pretty much the same as it was for SharePoint 2013 on premises. We're using the same project templates, we have the same item templates, the same Visual Studio tooling. We're building solutions or we're building apps. And considering that we're at beta 2, I can't really see any kind of significant changes prior to SharePoint 2016 being released to market sometime next year. I'll keep my eye on this as we get closer to RTM, and I'll post any updates I have either on my blog or here on my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the information in this video valuable.